Is your baitcaster backlashing on you something fierce? No need to worry, guys. I've got the answers to your problems. I'm Chris with Show Me the Hogs, and in this video I'm going to show you the steps to make sure that your baitcaster doesn't backlash anymore. I'm also going to explain the parts of a baitcaster and why baitcaster backlashes in the first place. So here are the parts of a baitcaster. You have your button that releases the line, a spool that holds the line. Here on top you have your level wind that guides the line in and out of the reel. You have your handle that you use to reel the line in. You have your drag that provides tension when you're fighting a fish, a spool tensioner knob, and a brake. But what exactly causes this thing to backlash? A backlash happens when the spool of the reel is spinning at a faster rate than the lure is traveling. What I mean by that is, if this lure can only be cast 35 feet, but this reel is set up to cast at 50 feet, this reel is going to try to add another 15 feet onto that cast. So when this lure starts to slow down at the end of the cast, this reel is still going to be spinning at a high rate, causing it to bunch up, and that's when you're going to get that backlash, that rat's nest, and that bird's nest. So let's see what we can do to prevent that. Now, to keep this thing from backlashing, there are two parts of this reel we're concerned with: the spool tensioner knob and the brake. Now, the brake is what controls the speed of the spool at the beginning of the cast. Now, there are two different types of brake systems. There's a centrifugal brake system and a magnetic brake system. A centrifugal brake system has a plate on it that you'll pop off, and you will slide these little tabs in and out depending on how many brakes you want to set. Now, this is a magnetic brake system. It has magnets inside of it that control the spool. So what I mean by that is, when I have this thing set, you're going to notice there's a free setting and a max setting. And when I have the dial set to free, those magnets that are inside of this reel are as far away from that spool as they possibly can be, which means that spool is going to spin at the fastest rate it possibly can when I cast. Now, opposite, when I spin this thing all the way to max, those magnets are now as close to that spool as they possibly can be, which means it's going to restrict how fast it can spin, and therefore it's going to restrict how far I can cast. Now, on the other side, we have our spool tension knob, and the spool tension knob controls the rate of the spool spin at the end of the cast. So let's just say I had the spool tension knob set to a really loose setting. I go to make a cast. At the end of the cast, when that lure starts to slow down, and even when it hits the water, this spool is going to continue to spin and cause it to backlash. We don't want that. Also, what you don't want to do is over tighten this knob. Let's just say I had my brake set on free and I wanted to use the spool tension knob as compensation for there being a free brake. That is also very, very bad, because what will happen is, whenever you use the spool tension knob as compensation for a free brake, eventually your reel is going to fail and you're going to have massive problems. So these are two very critical parts of the reel. Let them work together. Find a balance that works, and then let these two parts of the reel work in unison to give you the perfect cast. Now, what we're going to do to make sure this reel is set up properly, we are going to try to get this lure to fall from the rod tip down to the ground without this reel backlashing. So we're going to start with the lure about 6 inches away from the tip of the rod, and we're going to set our brake first. I really like my brake anywhere from 1/3 to about half. I'm going to set it halfway between max and free. Now, the spool tension knob is where we're going to adjust for the weight of the lure. Now, you're going to see I've got my lure set to 6 inches off the rod tip, and I'm going to push the button and see what it does. All right, so my spool tension is set pretty tight, because you can see that lure is not going down at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start slowly loosening the spool tension knob. And eventually that lure is going to start falling on the ground. There it goes. All right, so that's pretty good. I'm going to show you what will happen if it was too loose. I'm going to loosen this up quite a bit. And what's going to happen is, once I hit this button, that lure is just going to fall to the ground like it's not even on the line at all, and it's going to backlash. See that? Bam, you got a backlash. If that happens, you know your spool tension is way too light. All right, so we're going to reset. We're going to tighten this thing down quite a bit, and we're going to see what happens. All right, so we know our spool tension's pretty tight again, and we're going to start loosening her up. We're going to watch for that lure to just start slowly falling to the ground. Boom. All right, I'm going to show you that again. So the weight of this lure is just going to start taking line off the spool, and there's no backlash. So now we know that this reel is ready to rock. All right, guys, we're gonna give this thing a cast and see how well it works. Bam, no backlash, gorgeous. So now we know that this reel is ready to roll, but I've got a couple more tips for you guys to absolutely make sure this thing never backlashes. Tip number one, I have gotten into the habit of just letting my thumb kind of rest on the line as it's going out. Not pushing real hard, just kind of feathering it on there. You're just feeling that line going out. And the reason for that is when that lure hits the water, I'm just gonna push my thumb down on the line to make sure that there's not even so much as a little backlash. But more importantly, when I cast and I make a really bad cast that's going to suddenly strike a rock or a tree or the water before I expected it to, that sudden stoppage in the line, it's going to go from 60 to 0 in the blink of an eye, and that spool tensioner is not going to have enough time to compensate for the sudden stoppage in the line. It's going to cause a nasty backlash. So if I see that it's going to do that, I'll just smash my thumb down on that line before that lure hits whatever it's going to hit. And even though it's going to be a failed cast, I'd rather have that than spending the next 5 to 10 to 15 minutes untangling line out of this reel, wasting valuable fishing time. One more tip for you guys when you're out there fishing with a bait caster. If you're looking to change your lure, be sure to adjust the reel accordingly, because if you change out for a new lure and you don't adjust for that new lure's weight, you could get a nasty backlash. If I decide to change out this Rapala X-Wrap for a lighter or heavier lure, and this reel isn't properly adjusted for that new lure's weight, I could be in a real mess, and I'm going to be spending valuable fishing time untangling line out of my reel when I could be fishing. Well, if you guys want to learn more tips and tricks to help you out in your next fishing adventure, we'd appreciate it if you consider subscribing and joining our community of anglers. We also have a fishing tutorial playlist you might want to check out. We're on Facebook and Instagram, where we hang out, share pictures, stories, ask questions, give answers, all that good stuff. We hope to see you there, and we'll see you in the next video, guys. Thanks for watching.